Chapter 13. Miriam, again bound and under heavy guard in Kovadu's own hut, saw the night pass and the new day come without bringing the momentarily looked-for return of Korak. She had no doubt but that he would come back, and less still that he would easily free her from her captivity. To her, Korak was little short of omnipotent. He embodied for her all that was finest and strongest and best in her savage world. She gloried in his prowess and worshipped him for the tender thoughtfulness that always had marked his treatment of her. No other within the ken of her memory had ever accorded her the love and gentleness that was his daily offering to her. Most of the gentler attributes of his early childhood had long since been forgotten in the fierce battle for existence which the customs of the mysterious jungle had forced upon him. He was more often savage and bloodthirsty than tender and kindly. His other friends of the wild looked for no gentle tokens of his affection. That he would hunt with them and fight for them was sufficient. If he growled and showed his fighting fangs when they trespassed upon his inalienable rights to the fruits of his kills, they felt no anger toward him, only greater respect for the efficient and the fit, for him who could not only kill but protect the flesh of his kill. But toward Miriam he always had shown more of his human side. He killed primarily for her. It was to the feet of Miriam that he brought the fruits of his labors. It was for Miriam more than for himself that he squatted beside his flesh and growled ominously at whosoever dared sniff too closely to it. When he was cold in the dark days of rain or thirsty in a prolonged drought, his discomfort engendered first of all thoughts of Miriam's welfare. After she had been made warm, after her thirst had been slaked, then he turned to the affair of ministering to his own wants. The softest skins fell gracefully from the graceful shoulders of his Miriam. The sweetest scented grasses lined her bower, where other soft, furry pelts made hers the downiest couch in all the jungle. What wonder, then, that Miriam loved her Korak? But she loved him as a little sister might love a big brother who was very good to her. As yet she knew not of the love of a maid for a man. So now, as she lay waiting for him, she dreamed of him and of all that he meant to her. She compared him with the sheik, her father, and at thought of the stern, grizzled old Arab, she shuddered. Even the savage blacks had been less harsh to her than he. Not understanding their tongue, she could not guess what purpose they had in keeping her a prisoner. She knew that man ate man, and she had expected to be eaten. But she had been with them for some time now, and no harm had befallen her. She did not know that a runner had been dispatched to the distant village of the sheik to barter with him for a ransom. She did not know, nor did Kovudoo, that the runner had never reached his destination. That he had fallen in with the safari of Jensen and Malbeen, and with the talkativeness of a native to other natives had unfolded his whole mission to the black servants of the two Swedes. These had not been long in retailing the matter to their masters, and the result was that when the runner left their camp to continue his journey, he had scarce passed from sight before there came the report of a rifle, and he rolled lifeless into the underbrush with a bullet in his back. A few moments later, Malbeen strolled back into the encampment, where he went to some pains to let it be known that he had had a shot at a fine buck and missed. The Swedes knew that their men hated them, and that an overt act against Kovudoo would quickly be carried to the chief at the first opportunity. Nor were they sufficiently strong in either guns or loyal followers to risk antagonizing the wily old chief. Following this episode came the encounter with the baboons and the strange white savage who had allied himself with the beasts against the humans. Only by dint of masterful maneuvering and the expenditure of much power had the Swedes been able to repulse the infuriated apes, and even for hours afterward their camp was constantly besieged by hundreds of snarling, screaming devils. The Swedes, rifles in hand, repelled numerous savage charges which lacked only efficient leadership to have rendered them as effective in results as they were terrifying in appearance. Time and time again, the two men thought they saw the smooth-skinned body of the wild ape-man moving among the baboons in the forest, and the belief that he might head a charge upon them proved most disquieting. They would have given much for a clean shot at him, for to him they attributed the loss of their specimen and the ugly attitude of the baboons toward them. "The fellow must be the same we fired on several years ago," said Malbine. "That time he was accompanied by a gorilla. Did you get a good look at him, Carl?" "Yes," replied Jensen. "He was not 5 paces from me when I fired at him. He appears to be an intelligent-looking European, and not much more than a lad. There is nothing of the imbecile or degenerate in his features or expression, as is usually true in similar cases. Where some lunatic escapes into the woods, and by living in filth and nakedness wins the title of wild man among the peasants of the neighborhood. No, this fellow is of different stuff, and so infinitely more to be feared. As much as I should like a shot at him, I hope he stays away. Should he ever deliberately lead a charge against us, I wouldn't give much for our chances if we happened to fail to bag him at the first rush." But the white giant did not appear again to lead the baboons against them, and finally the angry brutes themselves wandered off into the jungle, leaving the frightened safari in peace. The next day the Swedes set out for Kovadu's village, bent on securing possession of the person of the white girl whom Kovadu's runner had told them lay captive in the chief's village. How they were to accomplish their end, they did not know. Force was out of the question, though they would not have hesitated to use it had they possessed it. In former years they had marched roughshod over enormous areas, taking toll by brute force, even when kindliness or diplomacy would have accomplished more. But now they were in bad straits. So bad that they had shown their true colors scarce twice in a year, and then only when they came upon an isolated village, weak in numbers and poor in courage. Kovudoo was not as these. And though his village was in a way remote from the more populous district to the north, his power was such that he maintained an acknowledged suzerainty over the thin thread of villages which connected him with the savage lords to the north. To have antagonized him would have spelled ruin for the Swedes. It would have meant that they might never reach civilization by the northern route. To the west, the village of the sheik lay directly in their path, barring them effectually. To the east, the trail was unknown to them, and to the south there was no trail, so the two Swedes approached the village of Kovudoo with friendly words upon their tongues and deep craft in their hearts. Their plans were well made. There was no mention of the white prisoner. They chose to pretend that they were not aware that Kovudoo had a white prisoner. They exchanged gifts with the old chief, haggling with his plenipotentiaries over the value of what they were to receive for what they gave, as is customary and proper when one has no ulterior motives. Unwarranted generosity would have aroused suspicion. During the palaver which followed, they retailed the gossip of the villages through which they had passed, receiving in exchange such news as Kovudoo possessed. The palaver was long and tiresome, as these native ceremonies always are to Europeans. Kovudoo made no mention of his prisoner, and from his generous offers of guides and presents seemed anxious to assure himself of the speedy departure of his guests. It was Malbine who, quite casually, near the close of their talk, mentioned the fact that the sheik was dead. Kovudoo evinced interest and surprise. "You did not know it?" asked Malbine. "That is strange. It was during the last moon. He fell from his horse when the beast stepped in a hole. The horse fell upon him. When his men came up, the sheik was quite dead." Kovudoo scratched his head. He was much disappointed. No sheik meant no ransom for the white girl. Now she was worthless, unless he utilized her for a feast or a mate. The latter thought aroused him. He spat at a small beetle crawling through the dust before him. He eyed Malbine appraisingly. These white men were peculiar. They traveled far from their own villages without women, yet he knew they cared for women. But how much did they care for them? That was the question that disturbed Kovudu. "I know where there is a white girl," he said unexpectedly. "If you wish to buy her, she may be had cheap." Malbine shrugged. "We have troubles enough, Kovudu," he said, "without burdening ourselves with an old she-hyena, and as for paying for one—" Malbine snapped his fingers in derision. "She is young," said Kovudu, "and good-looking." The Swedes laughed. "There are no good-looking white women in the jungle, Kovudu," said Jensen. "You should be ashamed to try to make fun of old friends." Kovudu sprang to his feet. "Come," he said, "I will show you that she is all I say." Malbine and Jensen rose to follow him, and as they did so, their eyes met, and Malbine slowly drooped one of his lids in a sly wink. Together, they followed Kovudu toward his hut. In the dim interior, they discerned the figure of a woman lying bound upon a sleeping mat. Malbine took a single glance and turned away. "She must be 1,000 years old, Kovudu," he said as he left the hut. "She is young," cried the savage. "It is dark in here. You cannot see. Wait, I will have her brought out into the sunlight," and he commanded the 2 warriors who watched the girl to cut the bonds from her ankles and lead her forth for inspection. Malbine and Jensen evinced no eagerness, though both were fairly bursting with it. Not to see the girl, but to obtain possession of her. They cared not if she had the face of a marmoset or the figure of pot-bellied Kovudu himself. All that they wished to know was that she was the girl who had been stolen from the sheik several years before. They thought that they would recognize her for such if she was indeed the same. But even so, the testimony of the runner Kovudu had sent to the sheik was such as to assure them that the girl was the one they had once before attempted to abduct. As Miriam was brought forth from the darkness of the hut's interior, the 2 men turned with every appearance of disinterestedness to glance at her. It was with difficulty that Malbine suppressed an ejaculation of astonishment. The girl's beauty fairly took his breath from him, but instantly he recovered his poise and turned to Kovudu. "Well," he said to the old chief. "Is she not both young and good-looking?" asked Kovudu. "She is not old," replied Malbine, "but even so she will be a burden. We did not come from the north after wives. There are more than enough there for us." Miriam stood looking straight at the white men. She expected nothing from them. They were to her as much enemies as the black men. She hated and feared them all. Malbine spoke to her in Arabic. "We are friends," he said. "Would you like to have us take you away from here?" Slowly and dimly, as though from a great distance, recollection of the once familiar tongue returned to her. "I should like to go free," she said, "and go back to Korak." "You would like to go with us?" persisted Malbine. "No," said Miriam. Malbine turned to Kovudu. "She does not wish to go with us," he said. "You are men," returned the black. "Can you not take her by force?" "It would only add to our troubles," replied the Swede. "No, Kovudu, we do not wish her, though if you wish to be rid of her, we will take her away because of our friendship for you." Now Kovudu knew that he had made a sale. They wanted her. So he commenced to bargain, and in the end the person of Miriam passed from the possession of the black chieftain into that of the 2 Swedes in consideration of 6 yards of American, 3 empty brass cartridge shells, and a shiny new jackknife from New Jersey. And all but Miriam were more than pleased with the bargain. Kovudu stipulated but a single condition, and that was that the Europeans were to leave his village and take the girl with them as early the next morning as they could get started. After the sale was consummated, he did not hesitate to explain his reasons for this demand. He told them of the strenuous attempt of the girl's savage mate to rescue her, and suggested that the sooner they got her out of the country, the more likely they were to retain possession of her. Miriam was again bound and placed under guard, but this time in the tent of the Swedes. Malbine talked to her, trying to persuade her to accompany them willingly. He told her that they would return her to her own village. But when he discovered that she would rather die than go back to the old sheikh, he assured her that they would not take her there, nor, as a matter of fact, had they had an intention of so doing. As he talked with the girl, the Swede feasted his eyes upon the beautiful lines of her face and figure. She had grown tall and straight and slender toward maturity since he had seen her in the sheik's village on that long-gone day. For years she had represented to him a certain fabulous reward. In his thoughts she had been but the personification of the pleasures and luxuries that many francs would purchase. Now, as she stood before him pulsing with life and loveliness, she suggested other seductive and alluring possibilities. He came closer to her and laid his hand upon her. The girl shrank from him. He seized her, and she struck him heavily in the mouth as he sought to kiss her. Then Jensen entered the tent. "Malbine," he almost shouted, "you fool!" Sven Malbine released his hold upon the girl and turned toward his companion. His face was red with mortification. "What the devil are you trying to do?" growled Jensen. "Would you throw away every chance for the reward? If we maltreat her, we not only couldn't collect a sou, but they'd send us to prison for our pains." "I thought you had more sense, Malbine." "I'm not a wooden man," growled Malbine. "You'd better be," rejoined Jensen, "at least until we have delivered her over in safety and collected what will be coming to us." "Oh, hell," cried Malbine, "what's the use? They'll be glad enough to have her back, and by the time we get there with her, she'll be only too glad to keep her mouth shut. Why not?" "Because I say not," growled Jensen. "I've always let you boss things, Sven, but here's a case where what I say has got to go, because I'm right and you're wrong, and we both know it." "You're getting damned virtuous all of a sudden," growled Malbine. "Perhaps you think I have forgotten about the innkeeper's daughter and little Celella and that nigger-at." "Shut up," snapped Jensen. "It's not a matter of virtue, and you are as well aware of that as I. I don't want to quarrel with you, but so help me God, Sven, you're not going to harm this girl if I have to kill you to prevent it. I've suffered and slaved and been nearly killed 40 times in the last 9 or 10 years trying to accomplish what luck has thrown at our feet at last, and now I'm not going to be robbed of the fruits of success because you happen to be more of a beast than a man. Again I warn you, Sven," and he tapped the revolver that swung in its holster at his hip. Malbine gave his friend an ugly look, shrugged his shoulders, and left the tent. Jensen turned to Miriam. "If he bothers you again, call me," he said. "I shall always be near." The girl had not understood the conversation that had been carried on by her 2 owners, for it had been in Swedish. But what Jensen had just said to her in Arabic she understood, and from it grasped an excellent idea of what had passed between the 2. The expressions upon their faces, their gestures, and Jensen's final tapping of his revolver before Malbine had left the tent had all been eloquent of the seriousness of their altercation. Now, toward Jensen she looked for friendship, and with the innocence of youth she threw herself upon his mercy, begging him to set her free, that she might return to Korak and her jungle life. But she was doomed to another disappointment. For the man only laughed at her roughly and told her that if she tried to escape, she would be punished by the very thing that he had just saved her from. All that night she lay listening for a signal from Korak. All about the jungle life moved through the darkness. To her sensitive ears came sounds that the others in the camp could not hear. Sounds that she interpreted as we might interpret the speech of a friend, but not once came a single note that reflected the presence of Korak. But she knew that he would come. Nothing short of death itself could prevent her Korak from returning for her. What delayed him, though? When morning came again and the night had brought no succoring Korak, Miriam's faith and loyalty were still unshaken, though misgivings began to assail her as to the safety of her friend. It seemed unbelievable that serious mishap could have overtaken her wonderful Korak, who daily passed unscathed through all the terrors of the jungle. Yet morning came, the morning meal was eaten, the camp broken, and the disreputable safari of the Swedes was on the move northward, with still no sign of the rescue the girl momentarily expected. All that day they marched, and the next, nor did Korak even so much as show himself to the patient little waiter moving, silently and stately, beside her hard captors. Malbine remained scowling and angry. He replied to Jensen's friendly advances in curt monosyllables. To Miriam he did not speak, but on several occasions she discovered him glaring at her from beneath half-closed lids, greedily. The look sent a shudder through her. She hugged Geeka closer to her breast and doubly regretted the knife that they had taken from her when she was captured by Kovudu. It was on the fourth day that Miriam began definitely to give up hope. Something had happened to Korak. She knew it. He would never come now, and these men would take her far away. Presently they would kill her. She would never see her Korak again. On this day the Swedes rested, for they had marched rapidly and their men were tired. Malbine and Jensen had gone from camp to hunt, taking different directions. They had been gone about an hour when the door of Miriam's tent was lifted and Malbine entered. The look of a beast was on his face. Chapter 14. With wide eyes fixed upon him, like a trapped creature horrified beneath the mesmeric gaze of a great serpent, the girl watched the approach of the man. Her hands were free, the Swedes having secured her with a length of ancient slave chain fastened at one end to an iron collar padlocked about her neck, and at the other to a long stake driven deep into the ground. Slowly Miriam shrank inch by inch toward the opposite end of the tent. Malbine followed her. His hands were extended and his fingers half opened, claw-like, to seize her. His lips were parted and his breath came quickly, pantingly. The girl recalled Jensen's instructions to call him should Malbine molest her, but Jensen had gone into the jungle to hunt. Malbine had chosen his time well. Yet she screamed, loud and shrill, once, twice, a third time, before Malbine could leap across the tent and throttle her alarming cries with his brute fingers. Then she fought him as any jungle she might fight, with tooth and nail. The man found her no easy prey. In that slender young body, beneath the rounded curves and the fine, soft skin, lay the muscles of a young lioness. But Malbine was no weakling. His character and appearance were brutal, nor did they belie his brawn. He was of giant stature and of giant strength. Slowly he forced the girl back upon the ground, striking her in the face when she hurt him badly, either with teeth or nails. Miriam struck back, but she was growing weaker from the choking fingers at her throat. Out in the jungle, Jensen had brought down 2 bucks. His hunting had not carried him far afield, nor was he prone to permit it to do so. He was suspicious of Malbine. The very fact that his companion had refused to accompany him and elected instead to hunt alone in another direction would not, under ordinary circumstances, have seemed fraught with sinister suggestion. But Jensen knew Malbine well, and so, having secured meat, he turned immediately back toward camp, while his boys brought in his kill. He had covered about half the return journey when a scream came faintly to his ears from the direction of camp. He halted to listen. It was repeated twice, then silence. With a muttered curse, Jensen broke into a rapid run. He wondered if he would be too late. What a fool Malbine was indeed to thus chance jeopardizing a fortune. Further away from camp than Jensen, and upon the opposite side, another heard Miriam's screams, a stranger who was not even aware of the proximity of white men other than himself, a hunter with a handful of sleek black warriors. He, too, listened intently for a moment. That the voice was that of a woman in distress he could not doubt, and so he also hastened at a run in the direction of the affrighted voice. But he was much further away than Jensen, so that the latter reached the tent first. What the Swede found there roused no pity within his calloused heart, only anger against his fellow scoundrel. Miriam was still fighting off her attacker. Malbine still was showering blows upon her. Jensen, streaming foul curses upon his erstwhile friend, burst into the tent. Malbine, interrupted, dropped his victim and turned to meet Jensen's infuriated charge. He whipped a revolver from his hip. Jensen, anticipating the lightning move of the other's hand, drew almost simultaneously, and both men fired at once. Jensen was still moving toward Malbine at the time, but at the flash of the explosion, he stopped. His revolver dropped from nerveless fingers. For a moment, he staggered drunkenly. Deliberately, Malbine put 2 more bullets into his friend's body at close range. Even in the midst of the excitement and her terror, Miriam found herself wondering at the tenacity of life which the hitman displayed. His eyes were closed, his head dropped forward upon his breast, his hands hung limply before him. Yet still he stood there upon his feet, though he reeled horribly. It was not until the 3rd bullet had found its mark within his body that he lunged forward upon his face. Then Malbine approached him, and with an oath kicked him viciously. Then he returned once more to Miriam. Again he seized her, and at the same instant the flaps of the tent opened silently, and a tall white man stood in the aperture. Neither Miriam or Malbine saw the newcomer. The latter's back was toward him, while his body hid the stranger from Miriam's eyes. He crossed the tent quickly, stepping over Jensen's body. The first intimation Malbine had that he was not to carry out his design without further interruption was a heavy hand upon his shoulder. He wheeled to face an utter stranger. A tall, black-haired, gray-eyed stranger clad in khaki and pith helmet. Malbine reached for his gun again, but another hand had been quicker than his, and he saw the weapon tossed to the ground at the side of the tent, out of reach. "What is the meaning of this?" The stranger addressed his question to Miriam in a tongue she did not understand. She shook her head and spoke in Arabic. Instantly the man changed his question to that language. "These men are taking me away from Korak," explained the girl. "This one would have harmed me. The other, whom he had just killed, tried to stop him. They were both very bad men, but this one is the worse. If my Korak were here, he would kill him. I suppose you are like them, so you will not kill him." The stranger smiled. "He deserves killing," he said. "There is no doubt of that. Once I should have killed him, but not now. I will see, though, that he does not bother you any more." He was holding Malbine in a grasp the giant Swede could not break, though he struggled to do so, and he was holding him as easily as Malbine might have held a little child. Yet Malbine was a huge man, mightily thewed. The Swede began to rage and curse. He struck at his captor, only to be twisted about and held at arm's length. Then he shouted to his boys to come and kill the stranger. In response, a dozen strange blacks entered the tent. They, too, were powerful, clean-limbed men, not at all like the mangy crew that followed the Swedes. "We have had enough foolishness," said the stranger to Malbine. "You deserve death, but I am not the law. I know now who you are. I have heard of you before. You and your friend here bear a most unsavory reputation. We do not want you in our country. I shall let you go this time. But should you ever return, I shall take the law into my own hands. You understand?" Malbine blustered and threatened, finishing by applying a most uncomplimentary name to his captor. For this he received a shaking that rattled his teeth. Those who know say that the most painful punishment that can be inflicted upon an adult male, short of injuring him, is a good, old-fashioned shaking. Malbine received such a shaking. "Now get out," said the stranger, "and next time you see me remember who I am," and he spoke a name in the Swede's ear, a name that more effectually subdued the scoundrel than many beatings. Then he gave him a push that carried him bodily through the tent doorway to sprawl upon the turf beyond. "Now," he said, turning toward Miriam, "who has the key to this thing about your neck?" The girl pointed to Jensen's body. "He carried it always," she said. The stranger searched the clothing on the corpse until he came upon the key. A moment more, Miriam was free. "Will you let me go back to my Korak?" she asked. "I will see that you are returned to your people," he replied. "Who are they, and where is their village?" He had been eyeing her strange, barbaric garmenture wonderingly. From her speech, she was evidently an Arab girl, but he had never before seen one thus clothed. "Who are your people? Who is Korak?" he asked again. Korak. Why Korak is an ape. I have no other people. Korak and I live in the jungle alone since Aut went to be king of the apes. She had always thus pronounced Akut's name, for so it had sounded to her when first she came with Korak and the ape. Korak could have been kind, but he would not. A questioning expression entered the stranger's eyes. He looked at the girl closely. So Korak is an ape, he said, and what, pray, are you? I am Miriam. I also am an ape. Was the stranger's only oral comment upon this startling announcement, but what he thought might have been partially interpreted through the pitying light that entered his eyes. He approached the girl and started to lay his hand upon her forehead. She drew back with a savage little growl. A smile touched his lips. You need not fear me, he said. I shall not harm you. I only wish to discover if you have fever, if you are entirely well. If you are, we will set forth in search of Korak. Miriam looked straight into the keen gray eyes. She must have found there an unquestionable assurance of the honorableness of their owner, for she permitted him to lay his palm upon her forehead and feel her pulse. Apparently, she had no fever. How long have you been an ape? Asked the man. Since I was a little girl, many, many years ago, and Korak came and took me from my father who was beating me. Since then, I have lived in the trees with Korak and Aut. Where in the jungle lives Korak? Asked the stranger. Miriam pointed with a sweep of her hand that took in, generously, half the continent of Africa. Could you find your way back to him? I do not know, she replied, but he will find his way to me. Then I have a plan, said the stranger. I live but a few marches from here. I shall take you home where my wife will look after you and care for you until we can find Korak, or Korak finds us. If he could find you here, he can find you at my village. Is it not so? Miriam thought that it was so, but she did not like the idea of not starting immediately back to meet Korak. On the other hand, the man had no intention of permitting this poor, insane child to wander further amidst the dangers of the jungle. From whence she had come, or what she had undergone, he could not guess, but that her Korak and their life among the apes was but a figment of a disordered mind he could not doubt. He knew the jungle well, and he knew that men have lived alone and naked among the savage beasts for years, but a frail and slender girl, no, it was not possible. Together they went outside. Malbine's boys were striking camp in preparation for a hasty departure. The stranger's blacks were conversing with them. Malbine stood at a distance, angry and glowering. The stranger approached one of his own men. Find out where they got this girl, he commanded. The Negro thus addressed questioned one of Malbine's followers. Presently he returned to his master. They bought her from old Kovudu, he said. That is all that this fellow will tell me. He pretends that he knows nothing more, and I guess that he does not. These two white men were very bad men. They did many things that their boys knew not the meanings of. It would be well, Bwana, to kill the other. I wish that I might, but a new law is come into this part of the jungle. It is not as it was in the old days, Muviri, replied the master. The stranger remained until Malbine and his safari had disappeared into the jungle toward the north. Miriam, trustful now, stood at his side, Gika clutched in one slim brown hand. They talked together, the man wondering at the faltering Arabic of the girl, but attributing it finally to her defective mentality. Could he have known that years had elapsed since she had used it until she was taken by the Swedes, he would not have wondered that she had half forgotten it. There was yet another reason why the language of the sheik had thus readily eluded her, but of that reason she herself could not have guessed the truth any better than could the man. He tried to persuade her to return with him to his village, as he called it, or douar in Arabic, but she was insistent upon searching immediately for Korak. As a last resort, he determined to take her with him by force rather than sacrifice her life to the insane hallucination which haunted her. But, being a wise man, he determined to humor her first, and then attempt to lead her as he would have her go. So, when they took up their march, it was in the direction of the south, though his own ranch lay almost due east. By degrees he turned the direction of their way more and more eastward, and greatly was he pleased to note that the girl failed to discover that any change was being made. Little by little she became more trusting. At first she had had but her intuition to guide her belief that this big Tarmangani meant her no harm. But as the days passed, and she saw that his kindness and consideration never faltered, she came to compare him with Korak, and to be very fond of him. But never did her loyalty to her ape-man flag. On the 5th day they came suddenly upon a great plain, and from the edge of the forest the girl saw in the distance fenced fields and many buildings. At the sight she drew back in astonishment. "Where are we?" she asked, pointing. "We could not find Korak," replied the man, "and as our way led near my douar, I have brought you here to wait and rest with my wife until my men can find your ape, or he finds you. It is better thus, little one. You will be safer with us, and you will be happier." "I am afraid, Bwana," said the girl. "In thy douar they will beat me, as did the sheik, my father. Let me go back into the jungle. There Korak will find me." "He would not think to look for me in the douar of a white man." "No one will beat you, child," replied the man. "I have not done so, have I? Well, here all belong to me. They will treat you well. Here no one is beaten. My wife will be very good to you, and at last Korak will come, for I shall send men to search for him." The girl shook her head. "They could not bring him, for he would kill them, as all men have tried to kill him. I am afraid. Let me go, Bwana." "You do not know the way to your own country. You would be lost. The leopards or the lions would get you the first night, and after all, you would not find your Korak. It is better that you stay with us. Did I not save you from the bad man? Do you not owe me something for that? Well, then remain with us for a few weeks, at least, until we can determine what is best for you. You are only a little girl. It would be wicked to permit you to go alone into the jungle." Miriam laughed. "The jungle," she said, "is my father and my mother. It has been kinder to me than have men. I am not afraid of the jungle, nor am I afraid of the leopard or the lion. When my time comes, I shall die. It may be that a leopard or a lion shall kill me, or it may be a tiny bug no bigger than the end of my littlest finger. When the lion leaps upon me, or the little bug stings me, I shall be afraid. Oh, then I shall be terribly afraid, I know, but life would be very miserable indeed were I to spend it in terror of the thing that has not yet happened. If it be the lion, my terror shall be short of life. But if it be the little bug, I may suffer for days before I die. And so I fear the lion least of all. He is great and noisy. I can hear him, or see him, or smell him in time to escape. But any moment I may place a hand or foot on the little bug and never know that he is there until I feel his deadly sting. No, I do not fear the jungle. I love it. I should rather die than leave it forever. But your douar is close beside the jungle. You have been good to me. I will do as you wish, and remain here for a while to wait the coming of my Korak." "Good," said the man, and he led the way down toward the flower-covered bungalow, behind which lay the barns and outhouses of a well-ordered African farm. As they came nearer, a dozen dogs ran barking toward them. Gaunt wolfhounds, a huge Great Dane, a nimble-footed collie, and a number of yapping, quarrelsome fox terriers. At first their appearance was savage and unfriendly in the extreme, but once they recognized the foremost black warriors and the white man behind them, their attitude underwent a remarkable change. The collie and the fox terriers became frantic with delirious joy, and while the wolfhounds and the Great Dane were not a whit less delighted at the return of their master, their greetings were of a more dignified nature. Each, in turn, sniffed at Miriam, who displayed not the slightest fear of any of them. The wolfhounds bristled and growled at the scent of wild beasts that clung to her garment, but when she laid her hand upon their heads and her soft voice murmured caressingly, they half closed their eyes, lifting their upper lips in contented canine smiles. The man was watching them, and he too smiled, for it was seldom that these savage brutes took thus kindly to strangers. It was as though, in some subtle way, the girl had breathed a message of kindred savagery to their savage hearts. With her slim fingers grasping the collar of a wolf hound upon either side of her, Miriam walked on toward the bungalow, upon the porch of which a woman dressed in white waved a welcome to her returning lord. There was more fear in the girl's eyes now than there had been in the presence of strange men or savage beasts. She hesitated, turning an appealing glance toward the man. "This is my wife," he said. "She will be glad to welcome you." The woman came down the path to meet them. The man kissed her, and turning toward Miriam introduced them, speaking in the Arab tongue the girl understood. "This is Miriam, my dear," he said, and he told the story of the jungle waif in so far as he knew it. Miriam saw that the woman was beautiful. She saw that sweetness and goodness were stamped indelibly upon her countenance. She no longer feared her, and when her brief story had been narrated, and the woman came and put her arms about her and kissed her and called her poor little darling, something snapped in Miriam's little heart. She buried her face on the bosom of this new friend in whose voice was the mother tone that Miriam had not heard for so many years that she had forgotten its very existence. She buried her face on the kindly bosom and wept as she had not wept before in all her life. Tears of relief and joy that she could not fathom. And so came Miriam, the savage little Mangani, out of her beloved jungle into the midst of a home of culture and refinement. Already Bwana and my dear, as she first heard them called and continued to call them, were as father and mother to her. Once her savage fears allayed, she went to the opposite extreme of trustfulness and love. Now she was willing to wait here until they found Korak, or Korak found her. She did not give up that thought. Korak, her Korak always was first.